In 2021, revelations surfaced that the US National Security Agency collaborated with Denmark intelligence to spy on senior officials of many Western European countries, such as Sweden, France, Norway, and Germany, where they reportedly wiretapped former Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone calls for decades. The US spying claims were years old by 2021, but when additional news of Danish intelligence collaboration came out a few years later, it sparked alarm in Europe. So what's the point behind all this? I mean, these countries all share the same Western values and have been close allies for decades now. Shouldn't they be collaborating rather than spying on each other? Well, yes, but history shows us that allies spying on allies is nothing new. On the contrary, within the shadowy world of espionage, this was just business as usual. The stakes involved with spying on your allies are also incredibly high, which begs the question, what kind of intel could be gained to justify the risks of being caught, and of the subsequent diplomatic fallout? Well, this wasn't the first instance of the US spying on European allies. Come to think of it, it wasn't even the first recent revelation of America spying on European states. Espionage is deemed necessary despite the risks. But how extensive is this? The Edward Snowden leaks of 2013 exposed the degree to which the US spies on allies. It was clear the NSA had the technological means to reach just about anyone, friend or foe. Angela Merkel was quick to condemn the revelations of phone tapping, but this apparent outrage would soon fade from the public eye, because, in pure irony, just 2 years later, it was revealed that Germany's intelligence service, the BND, had been spying on allied nations for years at the same time, from the US White House and Department of the Interior to the Interior Ministries of EU member states, including Poland, Austria, Denmark, and Croatia. They even targeted members of charities and non-government organizations, such as, bizarrely, the Vatican. But again, none of this is actually that surprising. So much so that when these leaks originally came to the surface about the US spying on Germany in 2013, it also included some files about the NSA spying on 3 French presidents, Jacques Chirac, Nicolas Sarkozy, and François Hollande, among other things. And the response to this, from a man known as Bernard Squarcini, who was the head of the DGSE, the French equivalent to the CIA, just a year before in 2012, was of no surprise at all. He even admitted France spies on the US too. He said, and I quote, "The French intelligence services know full well that all countries, whether or not they are allies in the fight against terror, spy on each other all the time. The Americans spy on French commercial and industrial interests, and we do the same to them, because it's in the national interest to protect our companies." There was nothing of any real surprise in this report. No one is fooled. This quote, though, reveals one of the primary reasons for it, that is, economic espionage. During the 1980s and 90s, for example, the DGSE engaged in economic espionage against the United States. French intelligence agencies targeted American companies to gain competitive advantages for French businesses across a number of industries. French agents were accused of spying on the computer company IBM, which, at the time, along with Microsoft, was one of the biggest tech companies on Earth. Reports indicated that agents from the DGSE were involved in stealing proprietary information and bribing employees for secrets from IBM to enhance France's competitiveness in the rapidly expanding field of information technology. Former CIA Director Robert Gates has even accused French intelligence of breaking into hotel rooms to steal laptops from prominent businessmen visiting the country. Reports soon surfaced that French intelligence were involved in industrial espionage to benefit their plane manufacturer company Airbus to break market dominance of its American competitor, Boeing. This sort of goes hand in hand with that of the Echelon Global Signals surveillance network, which was created in the late 1960s as an intelligence gathering tool against the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc allies. It was operated by a coalition of 5 Anglosphere nations, those being the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, also known as the Five Eyes Alliance. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, the Echelon program and its abilities remained fully intact. In the years after the Iron Curtain fell, the gradual exposure of this secretive program made European leaders anxious. After all, if this was about collecting intel on the Soviets, then why is it still running? And who are they spying on now? This anxiety was seemingly well-founded. According to whistleblowers, the program morphed to collect emails, test messages, and other smartphone data on a massive scale. Worse still, the participating countries were allegedly intercepting communications from their own allies, including political leaders and business people in Europe, figureheads from countries outside of Five Eyes. Given that the Five Eyes countries themselves are allied with just about every European country, it's not hard to see why EU states were angry about these countries effectively forming a spying capability, which was potentially being used against them by countries that were meant to be friends. After decades of rumors and whistleblower claims, in 2000, the European Parliament established a temporary committee on the echelon. The EU investigated the existence and implications of the network on European states, and released its final report a year later, confirming its existence and detailing its capabilities to intercept global communications. Although the report failed to produce categorical proof of economic espionage committed against the EU states, it did claim that Echelon was believed to have at least bugged telephone calls at aircraft maker Airbus during the mid-90s. The spying was, claimed the report, centered around the Saudi Arabian government placing an order for new planes worth billions of dollars. A tit for tat perhaps, given France's similar efforts against Boeing in the years prior. The French were said to have lost a contract for Airbus to the tune of billions of dollars. Britain, as at the time the only member of both the European Union and Echelon, was deemed untrustworthy by European ministers. And so it transpired, the shadowy group monitoring communications the world over really was real. In fact, in 2015, WikiLeaks published documents showing that the US was doing surveillance on Japan as far back as 2006, from the first term of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The intercepts were things such as US-Japan relations, trade negotiations, and climate change strategy. There was also a list of high-priority targets, including entries for the Japanese Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Mitsubishi's natural gas division, and a quote, government VIP line. The kicker, though, is that some of these exposed documents were marked for sharing with the Five Eyes alliance. Another reason for this friendly espionage is simply for security reasons. This may not make sense because when you're on the same side, there shouldn't be any security risks, but it does when you have to evaluate individual members belonging to your allies, who they may not be able to self-assess perfectly. Let me explain. In 2018, Austrian Foreign Minister Karin Knässel made headlines by inviting Russian President Vladimir Putin to her wedding, where, to the surprise of everyone, he danced with her in front of onlooking wedding guests. This event was notable not only for the unusual presence of a foreign leader, never mind Putin, but also because it raised significant concerns about Austria's alignment with Russia, or at least hers. Her dance with Putin came just months after Russia was accused of poisoning former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia with nerve agent Novichok in the United Kingdom. Looking at their photos, they were certainly on good terms. While Austrian intelligence may have not thought anything of this, you can't know whether your ally's assessment is trustworthy until you've conducted one yourself. So, naturally, there was justification there. The day before her wedding, it was reported that several Western intelligence agencies had stopped sharing sensitive information with their Austrian counterparts, alarmed that their secrets could be shared with Moscow. The reasons to spy on allies can stem from such incidents, as they show us how potential shifts in loyalty or undisclosed political or ideological alignments can change the game overnight. And it turned out to be a good thing, as she eventually moved to Russia a few years after leaving office in 2019. This goes hand in hand with ideological espionage. If you look at someone like James Jesus Angleton, for example, former chief of the CIA counterintelligence department for 21 years during the height of the Cold War, he's gone so far to accuse major world leaders of being Soviet assets, including Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme, Western German Chancellor Willy Brandt, and British Prime Minister Harold Wilson. Perhaps one of the best examples of spying on allies for security reasons is exemplified with double agent Jonathan Pollard, a US Navy intelligence analyst convicted of spying for Israel, possibly the US's closest ally. See, even countries with the most vital strategic ties often deem spying on each other a necessary evil. Pollard had been passing classified documents to Israel from 1984 until his arrest in 1985. He reportedly handed over troves of highly sensitive material, leaking intel on Soviet weaponry, Arab nations, and US intelligence gathering techniques in general. As a Jewish American and supporter of Israel, he claimed he was motivated by the belief that America was withholding crucial information from Israel for their survival. Pollard was uncovered after prolonged suspicious behavior, which soon prompted an investigation. Colleagues had noticed he was accessing numerous classified documents unrelated to his defense analyst duties and collecting hoarding material on subjects that had nothing to do with his area of analysis. His increasingly risky attempts to pass information to Israel agents ultimately led to his arrest. Pollard's actions strained US-Israeli relations and highlighted the reality of just how brazen espionage can be, even among the staunchest of allies. Pollard was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, but served just 30 years. He now lives in Israel and is seen as a hero of the country. As we can see, sometimes there is a tension between a country's principles and its interests. A trade-off between values and desired outcomes must be considered. These spy heads must consider the risks of being caught in the act as opposed to merely suspected of conducting espionage. Israel relies heavily on US arms to defend itself from hostile states, which virtually surround the country. And, put simply, Israel must have known that there was always a risk that their guy on the inside would be exposed by the Americans. Clearly, this risk was deemed acceptable by Israel. This isn't a one-time thing either, as even in 2009 it had come out that Israel had planted mobile phone spying devices near the White House and other sensitive locations in the US Capitol. But in response to that, a former US intelligence officer simply said they do the same thing in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, from 2004 to 2014, Canada sent back to the US 5 of a total of 21 of those barred from Canada on security grounds for engaging in an act of espionage that is against Canada or that is contrary to Canada's interests, according to a document produced by Canada Border Services Agency. This makes America the origin of the most espionage cases in Canada, followed by China, India, and Sweden, with 2 expulsions each in 10 years. These are their literal neighbors who they have excellent relations with and are quite literally harmless, no offense to Canadians. Of course, these institutionalized espionage realities aren't just limited to Western or NATO nations, but it happens often on the other side. Russia and China, despite being united against the West, spy on each other as well. In fact, just in 2023 alone, the director of a top Russian science institute, along with 2 scientists, all specialists in the development of hypersonic missiles, stand accused of giving secrets to China. Whether these specific charges are bogus, as some have said, or not, over a dozen scientists in the past few years have gone to prison for the same thing, so there's probably some truth to it. In the end, there's a saying popular among US intelligence officials, one that goes, "We have no friends, only targets." And when it comes to intelligence, this is the reality of how it works. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.